Good afternoon, everybody. It's live at the waterhole time yet again. My name's Ben Coley. I'll be with you for the next 2 hours, and we've started out this afternoon's little jaunt around the cameras dotted across Africa in Namibia at Safari Hook, thanks to Afrikaan's camera here. And we've got a lovely group of old big elephant bulls enjoying the water. And the other reason we've started here is a little bit earlier this morning, there were some lions seen at this waterhole, but we have been having a good look around and cannot find the offending felines currently, but you never know, maybe they decide to come back, although chances are, with all the elephants here and what look to be a few impalas in the background, they have vacated the area, but we will keep an eye on it for you for sure. But don't forget, we're live and interactive as always. So if you've got any questions or comments or anything you'd like to know about or share, please do send them in. You can see the details on the screen. And I, as always, will be very, very happy to at least attempt to answer any questions that you send through. But for now, I think we shall just enjoy these elephants enjoying what looks to be the fresh water coming out of the pipe. I'm assuming this is a pumped water hole. You can see them gathering around that little pool there, and definitely choosing or taking a preference to that area of water, very typical of elephants. This one having a shower, and it looks like there's a bit of a queue forming behind him. But let's see what plays out. I see we've had a few greetings sent through. Thank you as always. Please do continue to send them in. Mercedes Bean saying greetings to the Wild Earth crew. Along with the team in Johannesburg, I have Jordan in my ear helping me navigate the cameras today. Wishing us all a happy Saturday. Elka, good afternoon to you. And Fuzzy Dunlop, hoping for lions on Caturday. Well, certainly it sounds like they have made an appearance. We will have to cross our paws that they return at some point in the next couple of hours. If not here, maybe at one of the other many cameras we have dotted around southern and eastern Africa. It's so lovely now. We have such a wide variety of cameras to keep an eye on that you never know what you're going to see next, as we do like to say. Diana, yes, there is a chance that the lions will leave the area because the elephants are there. This whole idea of lions being king of the jungle is unfortunately just not true. Maybe they used to be in jungle areas, but there is, of course, no jungle in southern Africa. And any lion faced with an elephant will make way. Yes, there have been occasions where lions have and do continue to hunt elephants, but generally just the youngsters or badly injured ones. But certainly not in a herd structure if one has become separated. But I've seen it many times over the years that lions lying peacefully under a tree, an elephant casually saunters towards them, feeding them, gets a whiff of them or sees them, and just approaches the lions, and the lions just very much vacate the area. They know they're not going to get too involved with such a large animal. And I would imagine that if the lions did turn up, the elephants will probably chase them away. That being said, in the heat of the day like this, there is a sort of an unspoken truce between lions and potential prey. If the lions need to come down for a drink, they'll be watched very carefully by the impala and the other animals, but no one necessarily will vacate the area because the lions are not in hunt mode. The animals are quite confident they can see them. They've got plenty of time to react should the lions try something a little bit more extreme. So it is quite possible to see lions drinking at a waterhole surrounded by other prey animals during the heat of the day. Some lovely laughing doves and what looks like an Amaqua dove here with the long tail. Having a little peck around, looking for any seeds, maybe dropped off animals that came down to have a drink. You never know. Looks like a female on the mackerel dove that we're looking at there. It lacks the coloration that you'd expect to see on the chest and the head of the male. I think, was that the male on the left, maybe? Linker, yes, it is true. Lions may hunt elephant calves, particularly if one's got separated from the group. Then, yes, it does and has happened. It's not something that I've ever witnessed. It's not something that happens very often, but lions are quite capable of taking large prey. There have been reports of lions taking out young rhinos, of lions taking out hippos, even adult elephants, particularly up in the Savuti Channel area of Botswana, a very famous pride up there that did so. But if an elephant calf is separated from the rest of the family, then yes, unfortunately, it is fair game. So unlikely or uncommon, I should say, but certainly does happen. I see love the way these elephants cluster around this tiny little water source when there's a massive body of water right behind them, but obviously want that nice, clean, fresh water for obvious reasons, as we all would. Canine Girl, welcome to the show. I'm sure you're hoping to enjoy some great sightings, and I've no doubt we will do, and this is a pretty good start. But greetings back to you, saying hello to myself and Jordan, and Joanne Mello as well. Happy Caturday to you, and I'm glad you could join us. Trying to decide if that's a little bit of tender trunk touching, that's alliteration there, or probably more likely just having a little finger wrestle for exactly where the pipe is popping out, because they do have a tendency to clamp their trunks over the pipe and take the water direct. This one just bullied the other one out the way to see what was so interesting in that spot. See him having a good sniff there. And a lone springbok in and amongst the massive elephants. They are very large, these elephants, very, very big elephants in Namibia, possibly as a way to deal with the heat. Remember, if you've got a large surface area and a large volume, it takes longer for your insides to warm up. It's one way of dealing with hot environments. Actually, a good thing to be a large animal. Easiest way to describe that, a classic sort of example, is if you imagine you had two cubes, one 1 centimeter squared filled with water and another one a meter squared filled with water, and left them out in the African sunlight. The meter squared water would take a lot longer to warm up because it has so much more volume compared to its surface area. The ratios are very different. So you do tend to find some pretty sizable elephants in these very hot, dry, arid areas where little places to shelter from that oppressive African heat. Jill, quite why another elephant would have stabbed a second elephant? You're saying his friend here, but I assume they were hanging out together, therefore, in the backside with his tusk. I'm guessing it wasn't a full-blooded stab that broke the skin. So it was just a friendly nudge, I would imagine. Sometimes they do that. It's just communication, but like you tapping somebody on the shoulder, I suppose, or just a little nudge, time to move on, or maybe that one was interested to see what the other one was standing over or was investigating himself. So it's just forms of communication more than anything else. You'll certainly know the difference between a friendly nudge and a full-blooded fight. It's very obvious. You'll hear the clashing sound of tusks, and it's a very, very different situation if it was an aggressive thing. Uh, but those too many T's in my head. Those tusks are the ultimate stabbing weapon, very, very hard. They do break sometimes, but used by the elephant certainly as a weapon. But from what you have described, I imagine it was just a friendly nudge to get out the way or to move on, or possibly even provoking a little bit of play fighting between two bulls, which often happens as well. Lots of hierarchical little scraps going on in these bachelor herd scenarios. They all seem fairly chilled together, but they'll know who the biggest fish in the pond is, and that would be settled every now and again through disputes is a strong word, but little interactions between the group. Rosie Adams, you're saying you saw a baby elephant taken out by lions in a film called Battle Pride. So it does happen, particularly during drought. That's when baby elephants do tend to get separated. The adults have got to travel large distances to find a sufficient amount of food. And during those long treks, sometimes baby elephants can get disorientated and a little bit lost, or potentially was so exhausted it had to lie down, or it started lagging behind the group and lost contact. Doesn't happen very often. Elephant mothers are normally exceptionally good at keeping everybody together, such as the pride structure, but it does happen from time to time. And that elephant would have been very much depleted in terms of its energy, and with no adults around to protect it. As you say, it must have been quite harrowing to witness. A fairly long and slow demise, I would think, for the young elephant at the hand of lions. There's no way to choke out the neck. They'll clamp around the trunk potentially, but yes, I'm sure it was fairly upsetting to watch. But as you said, the lionesses have got cubs to feed, and it may have been an unfortunate end for the elephant, but one could argue that its end has gone to a good cause into feeding some baby lions. Circle of life, unfortunately. But that was a lovely start to the show. Thanks for all the questions and comments. I think we're going to head over to Jabulani now, just outside Hoodspray, where I am broadcasting from. Ah, we've got a sleepy hyena found himself, him or herself, a lovely spot in the shade there. Lenny, I'm glad Live at the Waterhole is your favourite. There is indeed so much to see. You never know what you're going to get next. Always nice when we get a hyena or a predator on one of the cameras. Not often we do during the heat of the day. It's pretty warm here in this area at Jabulani. There it's about 34, 35 degrees here in Hoodspray. Although I am delighted uh, to say that, as I'm sure has been pointed out to you already, that a couple of days ago we actually did have a little bit of a storm and we had some rain, not more than a few mils. Um, but I was actually in Kruger for the day. I went in just for an overnight stay, stayed up at Letaba. Went camping just for the evening and had a really nice long 2 day drives around the park. And on the first day I was there, that it was cold, it was windy. We had some drizzle for a couple of hours, and it was actually quite the honour to be in Kruger with some, I'm not going to call them substantial rains, but at least prolonged drizzle, which will have done everything a world of good. And I'm expecting that in the next week or two, we're going to start seeing a little bit more activity from the plants as they respond to that. Very, very nice. We also saw a hyena in the park with two little cubs who were suckling right next to the road. That was one of the highlights, as well as a honey badger that scuttled across the road at one point. Only a very brief sighting, but not every day you get to see a honey badger. A lovely little cavernous spot that this hyena has found itself. A nice little shady alcove there. Like a guarri, a magic guarri that's still got its leaves, very, very waxy leaves. That tree doesn't lose its leaves during the winter, and a lovely source of shade under these conditions. Yes, Canine Girl, great that we have so many cameras that we have access to now on Live at the Waterhole, thanks to African. I forget the exact number of possibilities we've got, but I think we're up to about close to 20 or 25, maybe even more cameras that we can check at any given time. So those busy beavers there in Johannesburg are keeping an eye on various cameras for us, and when they do find something with the help of our zoomies, they let me know, and we will quickly head over to the camera in question. Mercedes being you're fond of this camera because of the hyenas that we do see from time to time. And Andy in the UK, you're hoping that we see this hyena swim. That would be very nice. We did see one lying in the water up at what was it, Hyena Pan, I think, in Botswana a few days ago when I was doing the show. They do like to cool off in the water sometimes. Okay, speaking of Hyena Pan, let's head over there. We had a few little issues with the camera. Rosie Adams, you just actually said that it looked like a scene from a fairy story. Well, it certainly did at the end there, with some strange pinks and greens showing up. But yes, this is where we had a couple of hyenas in the water a few days ago. So, Andy, I can't offer you a hyena having a swim, but I can offer you an elephant having a paddle. I hope that is sufficient for now. two big bulls just enjoying, say, the limited areas of shade. Little dust bath, seeming very docile today. See all of that's what looks like at least scattered elephant dung on the ground around them. So obviously a favourite resting place. Come down, have a drink, have a little bit of a bathe, and then hang out under the shade here. Lizzie, you're enjoying the bird calls. I'm glad you are. Unfortunately, the audio doesn't seem to be coming through very well on my side, so I can't help you identify them. But those of you that can, perhaps you could assist. That looks like a starling up there, a glossy starling. Sorry, a Cape starling now. One of the many bird names that have changed. Quite why they removed the glossy part from the glossy bird, I don't know. But there you go. But you do get some other starlings up there as well. So I do stand to be corrected. We get greater blue-eared and glossy down here, which are very, very similar. And there is another blue starling. I just want to check its name according to my now slightly old book, which I wonder might also occur up there. Yes, the Myombo blue-eared starling, not one that I've ever seen before, but that's also a possibility up there. They don't occur in southern Africa, although there have been sightings up in the Pafuri region, which is, if you like your birding, that region right up in the north of Kruger is a bit of a mecca to go. You get lots of things up there that you won't find anywhere else in the country. Jill, have we seen leopards at Hyena Pan? I have not. I think probably our more regular viewers will be able to tell us if one has ever been spotted up there, but I would imagine so. Plenty of leopards in Botswana. I went and did a trip once in the Kwai region of Botswana, so just on the outskirts of the Delta many years ago now. And I think I was only out there for 3 nights hosting a safari. Um, and on our first afternoon drive, we saw 5 different leopards, which was ridiculous. And we didn't respond to any of them. We just bumped into them. A mother with cubs, 2 males having a bit of a territorial dispute, another random female that we found. I think in the course of those 3 days, we saw 10 different individuals, or 9 or 10 different individuals, in about somewhere between 15 and 20 separate sightings. So definitely plenty of leopard up in Botswana. Okay, I think let's chance our hand back at Jabulani and see if our camera's stabilized so we can have a good look at that hyena, assuming it's still around. Let's go try our luck. Is that a buffalo on the far side or is that a rock? We'll have to wait and see, but our hyena is still enjoying a little bit of afternoon slumber. Rosie Adams, do starlings here pull up worms? I'm sure they're quite capable of it, but we don't really have very many earthworms in this area. Most of the aeration of the soil, and all of those good things that earthworms do, particularly up in the northern hemisphere, um, is generally affected by termites down here. So starlings not, I've never seen a starling pull a worm out of the soil. It's not often you get to see very many worms here. They are around, but not in huge numbers. So they will spend most of their time catching other little arthropods, sort of crickets and moths and termites and ants and those little beetles. That's what they'll be specializing on in this area. And that is indeed a buffalo. Thank you, Zumi, for confirming that. A classic Duggar boy. Nice big body of water, this one. But a very lazy hyena, and why would you not be on a nice hot day like this? See all those beautiful acacia spines and thorns surrounding him or her. Got a very nice secure location there. Shade, water, a little bit of protection should they so need it. But it will be nice when all these acacias and all these other trees start to get their leaves, which won't be long now. Actually, doing some interesting reading this morning on a spider I was unaware of, called, I don't think it has an English name, but it's got an amusing Latin name. It's called Bagheera Kiplingi, named after Bagheera from the Jungle Book, and it is almost exclusively a herbivorous spider, which you don't get very often. Of course, most spiders are carnivorous, but these ones, the large majority of their diet, actually come from acacia trees. It seems they don't occur here in South Africa or Southern Africa, but you get them in Mexico, North America, and other areas where acacia trees are also present. Or I suppose we should call them Vachelia trees now. But they produce these little sort of tips on the end of their pinnules. So that sort of feathery leaf that an acacia has, there's almost like a secondary little leaf that grows on the tip of those little leaflets, which is very rich in lipids and fats and proteins, and about potentially up to 90% of this little spider's diet is actually of that vegetative matter, which is very unusual. Our Vachelias and our acacias do also produce those little things. So they're called uh, Beltian somethings. I'll have to double check. I've seen them before, but didn't really know what they were there for. Um, but it's something that the tree produces in order to feed the ants or to attract the ants, which then double as security for the tree. So they also produce nectar from little nectaries, which have nothing to do with pollination. Again, it's just feeding the home security system. But very interesting to see that there is an almost entirely herbivorous or vegetarian, at least, spider out there somewhere. It's going to annoy me now. What was that thing called? They were Beltian somethings. I'm going to have to go and double check. Beltian bodies. There we go. Fat and protein rich leaf tips. Good. I'm looking forward to summer and all the spiders coming out. I enjoy trying to identify spiders. I've got a spider book, don't like spiders, but I do find them fascinating. Well, I love spiders. I just don't want them on me. It seems a second dagger boy has entered the fray. Mindy, I'm glad that you find hyenas super cute, especially when they're young. I agree. They're incredibly cute. They kind of look like Labrador puppies when they're young and black. I used to have many, well, say many, I've had two or three black Labradors when I was young, grew up with black labs. And I do think it's very unfair that hyenas are often labeled as ugly animals. I think absolutely opposite. I think they're incredible things. Um, and I entirely blame the Lion King movie for that. For that, I had quite such strong opinions on hyenas, but it's rather destroyed their street cred, that's for sure. Hudson, yes, I fully expect to see more reptiles now that the weather is warming up. Of course, a lot of them do go into a state of torpor during the colder winter months, so not hibernation like you would associate with bears and things, but kind of like a mini hibernation, what we call a state of torpor, as opposed to estivation, which is kind of the opposite, where animals shy away and go into hiding to avoid the heat. So yeah, I'm sure we'll start to see more reptiles, more snakes. Hopefully, will be making appearances. The terrapins and things will still be there. But yeah, always nice just to look out for reptiles, the skinks, various types of lizards and things, the agamas. There'll be lots to see. Speaking of reptiles, it's probably a good opportunity to remind you that we have a reptile awareness fireside chat coming up on Wild Earth. We'll be celebrating World Reptile Day on the 20th of October at 7:30 in the evening, Central African time. And we'll be delving into the fascinating world of these reptiles. And there'll be a live demonstration from Jessica Joubert from the Hoedspate Reptile Centre. And that will be very interesting. Strongly urge and encourage you all to join in for that. Reptiles often poorly misunderstood and ill reputed, but amazing creatures nonetheless. Just Kendra, back to our hyenas. Yes, very boopable noses, absolutely. Boop. Julia, I see I missed your question. I'm sorry, you were asking of the well-being of that buffalo, because you haven't seen one sitting alone before. Well, I think there were actually two in the end, but no, don't worry. It's quite normal to see these old bulls. Sometimes they do prefer just their own company. Yes, often in little groups, but remember when they get a little bit older and they leave those big breeding herds that trample across the open plains or the necessarily open plains, but trample through the savannah here. When they get a bit old, they prefer to rather leave the herd and just hang out where they've got access to some soft foods and to a nice big watery area like this to help keep cool and hydrated. More often, yes, in little groups of sort of two, three, four, five, six of them, but not unusual to come across a solitary male. And those are the ones that you have to be particularly vigilant of. You should always think about that before approaching any body of water or anywhere where there is the potential of mud and things. You don't want to bump into one of those cantankerous old bulls. They do have a fearsome reputation, these Duggar boys, these old bulls, but I have to say, touch wood, I have never actually had a problem with one on a walk over the years. I've bumped into various buffaloes, but they've more often than not either stared at me rather intimidatingly down their nose the way they do, or they've turned and run, but always something to be wary of. Okay, I think we're going to head back over to Safari Hook in Namibia. And a pair of giraffe bulls. So if there are any lions around, they're doing a good job of keeping themselves out of sight, I would suggest. The oryx also coming down, the gemsbok. Lots of activity up here today. And another giraffe. Bianca, no, the giraffes don't really dust bathe. I think the one on the left is just a little bit lighter than the one on the right. Looks a bit smaller. It's often a sign that the older the giraffe gets, the darker they become. But this one is particularly light. But no, they're not able to sort of roll around like you might see a zebra or a wildebeest doing on the ground. But it is very dry and dusty up there. So if there was a bit of a dust storm, some may have got caked to the skin. But I think that is just a question of less melanin than perhaps we would normally expect, just a genetic thing. But they wouldn't be able to dust bathe at all. They actually have a bit of a design flaw, if you like, in their rumen and their four-chambered stomach. And I believe I'm right in saying if they were to lie flat on their side, they run the risk of choking because that food that is being stored in the rumen would actually overflow and flood and potentially end up in the lungs, which I'm sure would be a pretty horrible thing to happen to you. So giraffes, even when they sleep, they just lie down with their legs tucked underneath them. And if they are going to sleep, they will pretty much just turn their neck around and rest their chins on their rumps, a little bit like a duck would. And a water bug as well, all happening up at Safari Hook. But I think we're going to quickly shoot down to Tembe and see what's happening there. Our usual group of elephant bulls who just seem to hang out 24/7 at this waterhole in Tembe, very much a part of the environment here now. I don't think we've ever been down to this camera and I haven't seen at least a group of bulls, whether or not it's exactly the same ones. Sandy Franklin, you're commenting on those giraffes and how you think they have the sweetest faces. They do, don't they? They're very delicate and those lovely big puppy dog eyes and those long eyelashes to protect their eyes from those nasty thorns we were talking about earlier. But they are very pretty, elegant animals, even if a little ungainly at times. Beautiful tusks on this one coming in. A little bulge on his forehead as well. It's a bit of a strut going on, actually. It's kind of normally a walk I would more associate with a bull in must, but I see no evidence of must in this individual. Maybe just feeling particularly confident today. And why not when you look like that? Looks like a little pigmentation issue on the back of the ears there. It's quite pink on the back of the ears, not something I'd expect to see from a full-grown adult elephant like that. But he just gave us a flyby. Some big shout outs for Tembi coming through. Rosie Adams, loving Tembi, and Penelope Kenyon, also very, very happy we've popped back down to Tembi. Mindy Tillipal, the average diameter of an elephant's tusk. Ooh. I don't know if there is an average, Mindy. Let me just sort of use my hands and try and figure out what I would consider to be a decent sized average elephant tusk. Hang on a minute. So on average, maybe about 3 inches, perhaps. That's just sort of a guess from me playing with my hands and trying to figure out how big they would be. Of course, you do get bigger ones that might be more like 4 or 5 inches, but I would imagine that the average would be around about 3. But that is a thumb suck, as we say. 3 to 4. A good question. I do love it when you guys do send in random questions. You have to get my brain working. I actually found an elephant tusk in the bush not that long ago, a really large one as well. I reckon it must have weighed a good 30, 35 kilograms or so. Big, long, beautifully shaped tusk. Obviously was reported to reserve management so that they can come and fetch it and catalogue it and inform the relevant authorities. But yeah, you never know what you're actually going to find. I was actually out tracking something and saw something sort of bright and white out of the corner of my eye from behind a termite mound. Went in for a closer inspection, and it was a big elephant tusk lying there. No sign of any other bones or anything in the area, so a little bit strange, but yeah, just took a note of exactly where it was and reported it to the relevant authorities. Jill, if we find bones out on safari, we're supposed to leave everything where it is. It's all part of the natural ecosystem. Um, the general rule is you're not allowed to remove anything from the reserve. Of course, lodges and private residences there often like to decorate, if that's the right word, the surrounding area with things that have been found out there. But as a general rule, we try and leave everything where it is. Of course, and then we try and work out what had happened to it. But bones can also be used by other things as well. Remember, we have osteophagia with animals chewing on bones to get calcium and phosphorus, which will be very important this time of year when there's not so much nutrition available in the vegetation. So, as a mark of respect for the environment more than anything else, generally speaking, we try and leave anything like that where we found it. Another good use for a tusk, as a resting place for one's trunk. Mindy, no, I don't think anything would break down the tusk over time. I'm unaware of anything that eats ivory, so I imagine it would just be like a bone and would just sort of sit there and eventually be buried. We have found woolly mammoth tusks and things buried in the tundra, so there's no form of bacteria or little arthropod. Uh, I'm pretty confident in saying that actually digests ivory like that. So no, it would just stay there untouched if left to its own devices. And Rosie Adams, yes, sometimes uh, tusks do cross if they're growing in funny directions. Not all of us have perfect teeth. So, yeah, sometimes they can cross over. I know there's a famous elephant down in KZN at one of the places, I don't want to say a captive elephant, but a rehabilitated elephant who's a bit of a star down there by the name of Rambo, who I have seen. He has got crust tusks, crossed tusks. Oh, that's quite difficult to say. Too many S's. Crossed tusks, where they have grown sort of intertwined with one another. So it does happen from time to time. Sometimes you see one that points straight down, other ones that actually curve back towards their front legs. But yeah, all to do with genetics. We've just quickly nipped up to Hyena Pan because look at this little bundle of cuteness. I'm trying to have a drink here. Very, very small little Eddie. Come on, get your trunk up. Oh, how cute is this little elephant? It's like he's in the kiddies pool in a big water resort or something. I'm getting a free shower. Having a good investigation must be so many interesting smells when you're that young. Right, sorry everyone, we had a little bit of breakup there. We've come back to Tembe, but very, very cute to see such tiny little elephant. Hilary B, you're asking, do we ever offer people the opportunity to feed animals by hand out on safari? No, not in wildlife reserves and preserves that are natural ecosystems. We certainly don't want to do that. The only time that we, when I say we, I mean reserve management or humans, would get involved there is if there was absolutely no food around and there was some supplementary feeding that would be required, but it's not something that we encourage, and it's usually tried to be avoided unless absolutely necessary. And it's not in inverted commas, an experience that you can expect to be offered in a typical reserve. If you went to a rehab centre or a more sort of, I suppose, sort of zoo slash safari park, where animals are far more used to people, they're not so much wild anymore if they've been hand reared, then you might have the opportunity, but definitely not in a wild setting. Certainly nowhere that I'm aware of that would do so. Kev, you'd like to know whether we ever find babies with bachelor herds. Generally speaking, no, because these bachelor herds are made up of bulls which have vacated their breeding herds, so they've reached sexual maturity and they've kind of been pushed out of their breeding herds by their mothers and by the matriarch. And these are the boys just hanging out together. So little ones need their mums and they need the safety uh, prescribed by those breeding herds. So you would never see a baby here amongst these adult bulls. Occasionally, there have been stories that younger than normal males might sort of leave their breeding herd for a few days and hang out with their older brothers and then return. Because remember, it's not an instant thing that when it's time for a male to leave the breeding herd, it's not just they don't sit down, have a discussion, and then kick him out. It generally happens over a period of time, perhaps over years, where they start hanging out at the back of the herd and then they start going away for a few days and then coming back and then a little bit longer and then coming back until they completely sever the apron strings, as it were. And there have been cases of, younger, maybe sort of 8, 9, 10-year-old male elephants seen hanging out with bachelor groups, almost as if they've gone on a bit of a field trip just to see what the real world is like before being delivered back to mum. But no, you're the only reason I could think that you might ever see a baby with a bachelor group is, like we were talking about earlier, if one had got lost or separated, that may end up in and amongst one of these. But I can't imagine that the bulls would have the same level of parental instinct or maternal instinct to look after it. Obviously, they wouldn't be able to give it any milk, but on the assumption that it was able to eat its own food by then, they do roam quite far, these bull elephants, and I don't think they're going to be hanging around and waiting for a youngster. So, as a generalized rule, no, but never say never in nature. Learnt that a long time ago. We try to avoid finite words like never and always, because nature has a sick sense of humor, and the second you say it to somebody out on drive, the opposite is likely to happen. So yes, we have a great repertoire of non-committal phrases like most of the time, statistically, usually, often, hardly ever, etc., etc. Jill, that's a good question. If the pan dried up, how would the elephants cope? Well, that's going to come down to reserve management strategies, and a plan would have to be made because the second you enclose animals in an area, be it small or large, it becomes our responsibility from a management perspective to ensure that they have all their specific needs met, and there is enough resources. So if the pan was to dry up, there would have to be some pumping of water to ensure that the animals have enough. It's one of the reasons why many waterholes are pumped. Um, so many, only some should be pumped. The majority should be left to natural devices so that when they do dry up, animals leave that area, the vegetation, the geology, and everything else has a chance to recover because the animals will go to more permanent water sources and then return after the rains, and these more seasonal pans or waterholes fill up again. But yeah, it's a bit like supplementary feeding. If you have no water and you have a bunch of animals that you have restricted to your area, then it becomes your responsibility to ensure that they do have enough water. And Sandy Franklin, yeah, as you said, if there was a major drought, then reserves do consider, and I know some, particularly things like wildlife estates, are doing a lot of supplementary feeding at the moment and pumping of water holes to ensure that their animals do have enough food and water because they are restricted to those areas. So, as I said, it's not something we want to do. We don't want to play God and we don't want to mess with things. But if we have inadvertently caused that situation by blocking off an animal's ability to go elsewhere, then we should be supplementary feeding and providing water, absolutely. Okay, well, that was a lovely little visit to the greenery of Tenby Elephant Park. Let's zoom all the way up to the northwest to Tau in Midickway. The elephants sludging around in the mud. Tau is a malaria-free area of South Africa. And I only bring that up because that same article I was reading about the vegetarian spider I mentioned, they also made reference to another species of jumping spider which occurs around Lake Victoria, which specializes in feeding on female Anopheles mosquitoes, which are the mosquitoes that carry malaria. They will eat other mosquitoes as well, but their first choice food is recently fed and human blood filled Anopheles mosquitoes. So one could argue that they are a small vector of malaria control. But interesting that they choose the Anopheles mosquito in particular, but they do sit differently. You can identify an Anopheles mosquito by the way it holds its abdomen at about 45 degrees to the surface it's sitting on. And apparently the spiders can identify this and they will actively seek out Anopheles mosquito species, as well as look at how swollen their abdomens are, because that will dictate how much blood is in them, and they will choose the Anopheles with the biggest abdomens. Well, isn't nature amazing? There's even a niche for things feeding on a specific mosquito species. This elephant having a lovely mud pack, sort of with his head down in the mud, scooping it up, digging it up with his tusks, and now it seems smearing it all over his face. And the little one's decided it's all a bit too much, and we're going to have a lie down. Danny, no, I don't believe animals are susceptible to malaria. It's a particular type of protista, which is in our blood, which is then transferred from one human to another human by the Anopheles mosquito. It's not something that the mosquito gives you, it's something that it transfers to you from another person, another human. But there are I'm just trying to think if there are any mosquito-borne diseases of animals. There must be. Dengue fever, is that mosquitoes? I'm not sure if animals get that. That I'd have to look into, Danny. But many ticks certainly are vectors of diseases for animals, but I don't know of any specific to mosquitoes. But I'll see what I can find out. But no animals that get malaria, to my knowledge, no. Oh, Danny, I'm just doing a quick internet search, and it seems that it might be possible for malaria to be transferred to other organisms. I'm skim reading now. I'll let you know what I find, but that was news to me. Again, this is why we encourage questions. There's so many questions out there to be asked, and well, sometimes not before these uh, shows and like the waterholes and wild earth safaris, I often try and do some reading of something a bit different and unusual, but there's so much to choose from. But I've never actually considered that. So I'm just trying to see what I can find. Um, I have also discovered that mosquito-borne viruses that can impact animals include Japanese encephalitis and West Nile virus. none of which I'm particularly knowledgeable on, I'm afraid. Well, all I've managed to discover is that some animals, birds, rodents, reptiles can be infected with malaria species, so different types of malaria, but not the same one that affects humans, although it seems apes and humans can share some malaria species, which would make sense. Apparently, various species of bird in Hawaii over the years have become sick and even extinct due to the introduction of types of malaria. Well, every day's a school day, as they say. Anyway, back to our elephants, who are loving life in the mud. Charmaine, I do. I'm glad that you are enjoying seeing all of these amazing images from the comfort of your own home. That is the beauty of this show. We can bring all of these amazing interactions and animals wherever you are in the world. All you have to do is tune in. And you saw some elephants up close at Buckabung in Pilansberg. I hope you had some good sightings there. Not a reserve I get to go to very often, Pilansberg, but I remember it being very pretty and enjoying my time there. Haven't been for many, many years though. And I've still yet to see a cat in Pilansberg. I have been a few times. I've never seen a lion or never seen a leopard there, unfortunately, but just luck of the draw sometimes. Mindy Tillipal, no, we don't take malaria medication over here. You can't take it for long periods of time, otherwise it would be very bad for you. Your kidneys would start to fail. So it's just one of the things that if you live or work out here, we accept the risks of malaria. That being said, touch wood, this is now my 18th year in South Africa, or coming to the end of my 18th year, and I am yet to have malaria once, that I'm aware of at least. Tick bite fever once or twice. But malaria is not, I'd say it's not too bad. Obviously, it's horrific, but malaria becomes horrific if you don't get to the doctor in time. The problem is that it does tend to manifest as flu to begin with. So it's often just left, and then it gets worse and worse and worse. And by the time you realize that, okay, this isn't flu, this is something more, then it becomes a little bit more difficult to shift. And if you get a nasty dose of malaria, like a cerebral malaria, you can be man down for weeks on end, if not longer. So as long as you go to the doctors and get the relevant medication relatively quickly, then you'll feel pretty awful for a while. But there's no great long-term risk. The problem is leaving it for a while. And obviously, those people who do come to South Africa and they're taking Malarone or other similar prophylactics, most of you who have done this will know that you're supposed to take that medication probably for at least a week after you get back. And general advice is that even in the next month or so, if you start feeling like you've got flu-like symptoms and you know you've been to a malaria area, it's a good idea just to go to the doctor and just say, look, it's probably flu, but I have been to a malaria area, and and they can do a quick test and tell you within minutes whether or not it is malaria, and then you can get the relevant medication. Just Kendra, you were saying that heartworms are spread by mosquitoes, but that sounds horrific. Worms in your heart. I'm afraid I know nothing about heartworms, but I will definitely be having a quick search because I'm now intrigued. Not that I ever want to experience heartworms. And Rosie Adams, I'm sorry to hear that your father suffered for years of recurring malaria. Yes, which is a thing as well. It has a tendency to keep coming back. You never properly shift it. Yeah, it can be very nasty. I thought that waterbuck was eating the cattle he group for a minute. That would have been interesting. CD's been, yeah, use bug spray. It's always a good idea for anti-tick sprays and anti-mosquito repellents. I have my doubts, honestly, as to how effective they are. I'm not a big fan of these bracelets and these shirts laced with anti-mosquito things. There's the skeptic in me thinks it's all a bit of a gimmick. I think, to be honest, if you're going to get bit by mosquitoes, you're going to get bit by mosquitoes. General rule would be to ensure that you're covered up, wear long sleeves. Those little coils do work quite well. Citronella also works to keep some mosquitoes at bay. Strangely enough, burning elephant dung is also quite a good mosquito repellent. But yes, prevention is better than the cure, certainly. Just Kendra, you're saying that heartworms is a canine disease, not human. But I'm sorry for the dogs, but I'm glad that I don't have heartworms to look forward to in my future. Parasitic roundworm sounds horrific. Gosh, they can get up to a foot or more in length. I don't think I'm going to continue reading about heartworms. That's too horrible. Okay, let's head back over to Jabulani and see if our hyena is still enjoying its midday slumber. Yeah, it hasn't really moved. Contorted itself slightly. That's about as much as happened whilst we've been away. Conserving energy for another evening of scavenging and potential hunting. Just don't forget this is night time for the predators at the moment. Sleepy time. Speaking of nocturnal activities, though, I should probably point out, or time for a little bit of space news, that for those of you in the southern hemisphere, the comet is visible again, or should be visible again, after sunset. Um, I didn't have a chance to see it in the early morning. I'm not much of an early riser these days, unless I'm out on safari. So this evening, assuming the weather stays clear, I shall be out comet hunting after sunset. See if I can catch a glimpse, maybe even photograph this comet now that it's back after its little circling of the sun. So crossing fingers for some nice views and maybe even a photo or two this evening. Problem is, it's going to be in the west, and here in Hoedspruit we have the escarpment, the Little Drakensberg Mountains in the west. So I'm not sure if it's going to be high enough in the sky for me to see it, but I'm going to go and have a good look this evening. And of course, in other big news, the NASA's Europa Clipper mission launched, was it 4 days ago? 5 days ago? What's the date today? 5 days ago, launched on the 14th. So in 5.5 years, it will arrive at Jupiter's moon Europa to do lots more research on its with regard to its surface and hopefully discover more about that subsurface ocean where maybe, just maybe, life might exist underneath that icy crust. So exciting times if you can wait until 2030 to find out more. Hannah, it reminds me of how your dog sleeps. I can understand that completely. Although dogs do sleep in a variety of amusing fashions, certainly. I see a few of you also getting afflicted by mosquitoes. Mercedes Ben, Minda Tilipa, you're saying both saying that the mosquitoes love you. Well, my sympathies. It does seem that mosquitoes prefer some people over others. It's all to do with the pheromones that we give off, and some people are more attractive to mosquitoes than others. I'm fairly fortunate in that whilst I do get the occasional bite, they generally will leave me alone. But it's always a good idea to associate yourself with somebody who is very prone to mosquito bites, and then they keep them away from you, to be quite honest. But interesting how some of us do give off the more appropriate pheromones than others. I remember trying to do some reading and finding out what it was, but I can't honestly remember if there was a specific thing that people give off. But there's obviously something that the mosquitoes can pick up and choose certain people over others. Buffalo using his inbuilt pillow. Everybody taking it easy this Saturday afternoon. Oh, nice to see our hyena having a little shift of position there. It looks like a female. It's always hard to tell with hyenas. It looks bulky enough to be a larger female. Nice to see some activity. I'm just doing some checking on what makes people more attractive to mosquitoes. A lot of it's got to do with carbon dioxide. So if you produce more carbon dioxide than the average person, you're more likely to be attractive to mosquitoes. Um, there's also certainly a lot of links to just simple genetics of obviously we have no control over your diet. Maybe sort of spicier foods and things can make you smell a little bit more attractive. Possibly being pregnant also makes you more attractive to mosquitoes because you're potentially warmer, which is something that they look for, as well as producing carbon dioxide, and just your the microbacteria living on your skin can also attract mosquitoes to you. So if you happen to have that particular cocktail of microbacteria, then perhaps that also makes you more attractive. Who knows? Lots of different theories. There's plenty of natural insect repellents out here as well. Wild basil, wild aniseed, something called purple panweed. All of those can be rubbed onto the skin. Joe Miller, do they like certain blood types? I also did see that it seems that possibly some species of mosquito do have a prevalence for different blood types, but from what I just saw from a quick search now, um, there's nothing sort of to 100% substantiating that. It's most likely to be a combination of a variety of factors, I would think. But there have been some suggestions that that is the case. Apparently, Asian tiger mosquitoes, like people with type O, type AB, could possibly attract marsh mosquitoes. Mm. So yeah, I don't think there's anything definitely 100% scientifically proven, but again, more theories. Oh, Laura Moore suggesting you can add garlic to keep mosquitoes away. And you used to add garlic powder to grain to keep flies away from animals. Well, it makes sense, certainly. But yes, I agree, Laura Moore. It seems to be mostly they're attracted to our carbon dioxide. So if you are producing more carbon dioxide than the average person, then there is a better chance that you will be targeted by mosquitoes. They've got those feathery antennae, which the males lack. One of the ways they hone in on your carbon dioxide signals. Apparently, that little spider I was mentioning earlier is also able to visually identify that as well. So they can identify the stance of an Anopheles mosquito, the size of its abdomen to make sure that it is a well-fed mosquito, and will also eat female Anopheles mosquitoes over male Anopheles mosquitoes, which they identify by noting how feathery their antennae are. But everybody very peaceful at Jabulani. Susie C, you want to know whether I think humans will one day live on another planet and probably mess it up like we are doing to Earth. Yeah, I do, Susie C. If we don't destroy ourselves before we get to that level of technology, I mean, we're talking about it already. Sent people to the moon ages ago. We're sending people back to the moon. There's all this talk about going to Mars and everything else. So I would say it is the natural progression of our species to start exploring and populating the surrounding cosmos. Hopefully, we will learn or will have learnt from some of the lessons here in terms of how we should treat a new world if we do ever get to that stage. But yeah, I think it's the natural progression. How long it's going to take, I don't know, another 100 or a couple of 100 years, a few more generations before I think we're in that position. But we are certainly exploring the opportunities. There's various research being done on cryogenically freezing people for long trips and the ability to utilize things like ice and water and turning it into viable oxygen and everything else, growing fungi and things to survive on, all sorts of opportunities. So yes, I think it's highly likely, assuming we survive long enough to develop the technology to do so. Okay, but nice to see everybody having a very dozy time at Jabulani. Let's head back up to Safari Hook in Namibia and see if there's still a hive of activity there. Beautiful. Oryx and some great big elephants in the water. meeting of great minds around the waterhole. There are some stories being swapped there over a few hundred years of experience. And I'll more. Yeah, I wonder if cockroaches can survive on Mars. I think we probably would have tested that, and I would think the answer is no, otherwise we would have heard more about it. Lichen can survive on Mars. They've done experiments on that, but cockroaches are particularly hardy things and resistant to radiation or certain levels of radiation from other things. I don't know is the official answer, but you would think if there were some, we might have come across some by now. Although there have been some recent suggestions that there could still be things living under the surface. Certainly, but we haven't found anything yet. But we recently found some flatworms, the things living in between strata of tectonic plates or something under the ocean. I remember seeing something recently about that, so you never know. So, Alarmo, you're imagining an elephant on the moon with the lighter gravity. Yes, that would be quite funny. Bouncing around on the moon. I think that should be NASA's next plan. Put an elephant on the moon. You're also mentioning those jumping spiders who are good at mental mapping, very much doing their hunting based on visual acuity. They've got excellent eyes. And yes, I think the one that you're referring to there is known as Portia, who's a jumping spider that hunts other spiders. And I also saw a thing on the Portia spider where it was able to plan its attack to get close enough that the other spider didn't see it coming, even though it wouldn't necessarily take the most direct route. It would plan an approach to keep it hidden. And yes, and definitely some mental calculations being done in terms of the best success rate for a hunt. So again, another little tiny animal that we might not think about that has some incredible adaptations and far more going on under the surface than we might think. These two having a little nuzzle. Lady Macbeth, you're recommending An Immense World by Ed Yong as a good book to understand animal senses. I shall certainly keep an eye out for that one. Thank you for that. There are much more going on than we fully understand, and that I have no doubt. The simple fact that we're discovering things almost on a daily basis and we've been looking for so long just shows how little we know. Probably have really just scratched the surface. Look at these two elephants. This one's cradling the other one in his tusk. How beautiful is that? And Sandy Franklin, do I think other animals are afraid of elephants? I don't know whether afraid is the right word. I worry we would be anthropomorphizing a little bit, but I think certainly have a great deal of respect for. Because I mean, you see impalas and springbok and cameras like this weaving in and out between them, but they are wary of them, certainly. I think respectful, perhaps, rather than afraid. Quite rightly so. A bit of a traffic jam in here. And some lovely tactile communication going on here from a variety of members of this group. So nice to see these massive animals playing so gently or communicating so gently. And only once or twice have I ever seen two elephant bulls really going at it against one another in a full-on fight. So it is something you want to keep your distance from if it ever does happen. It's all two bulldozers not really looking where they're going. It's so nice to see them I was going to say being so gentle. There's a little bit of feistiness occurring there, but nothing too serious. It's amazing to watch. I don't even know what you would call this. It's not so much play. It's almost affectionate in its behaviour. Seen someone's rung the bell though on that little exchange. Hillary B, yes, I have had an elephant touch me with its trunk on the way past a vehicle. It's something that I was perhaps more comfortable doing many years ago while I was young and probably a little bit ignorant. I would be less inclined to allow it to happen now. I think over the years I've adapted to or evolved to give elephants a little more space than I used to. I think that's just a sign of age and having seen and experienced many things that I'm more respectful for these animals than perhaps I used to be. But it's an amazing experience when it does happen. It all comes down to a bit of a judgment call, but sometimes you find yourself in a situation where you're unable to move, or it may not be such a good idea to move because the animal is so close. Last thing you want to do is start the vehicle and give it a shock, and you sort of found yourself in that situation and you have to let it play out. But the 9 times out of 10, it's just exploratory. They're just investigating us, smelling us. So remember, they're hugely intelligent animals. Their lives are dominated by a sense of smell. So it's just investigative more than anything else. A bit like you see that one touching the other one's mouth. Thankfully, the elephant didn't put its trunk in my mouth. It's quite an intimidating experience, though, and you're putting an awful lot in faith. But as we always say, the nice thing about elephants is that they are very emotive animals and unlikely, although possible, but unlikely to suddenly change their emotion at any given moment. You can always sort of see it happening or that behavior evolving. The most important thing is just to remain calm in that situation, but not something I recommend you go out of your way to try, that's for sure. Sandy Franklin, no, not all the cameras that we have are part of Kruger. Here we're much closer to Etosha, just on the outskirts of Etosha at Safari Hook. We've got cameras up in um, Kenya, various different conservancies and areas. A lot of the cameras, or some of the cameras that we have in Southern Africa or South Africa, are a part of the Greater Kruger National Park. So the private reserves surrounding the government-owned national park, but not restricted only to the Kruger National Park. Absolutely not. No, we like to give you a beautiful cross section of the diversity of African wildlife and locations where best we can. So thanks to these cameras with Africa, we're able to do that. But you're right, Mindy Telepower, it is an amazing experience to feel like you're interacting or to be interacted with by a wild animal and the way they come over and investigate. It is quite humbling and a very special experience as long as it's done safely. I think one that always gets me is when a lion walks past the car and then they stop and they look up at you. You can almost sort of see them evaluating what's going on. Also with an elephant, perhaps due to its better ability to cognate, if that's the right word. But it's always quite disconcerting when a lion just stands next to your door and looks up into your eyes. Um, I have to say, I normally break the stare first. They normally win. It's quite an intimidating prospect, but it is something amazing that guests will always remember, and that we will always remember as well. It's one of the privileges of spending time with these iconic animals. I suppose this is a good opportunity just to mention the Green Season Grand Tour, which is going to be April, May next year. We are looking for a solo lady traveller. Oh, not sure what happened there. A solo lady traveller to share with another lady. We've got one spot left. And it's going to be an amazing trip with lots of exciting things to do and to experience. There'll be a rhino collaring experience, a two wild film school workshop, and of course, most importantly, you're going to have the great James Hendry as your private guide throughout the trip. So please do get in touch if you would be interested to join. It will be an amazing experience, I have no doubt. But this has been an absolutely beautiful spectacle to watch here at Safari Hook. It's been so nice to see these bulls, particularly those two in the water there, engaging in such, most of the time, tender, I don't even want to call it play. Still not quite sure what the right word is, these tender interactions. They were almost sort of holding trunks at one point. It really was rather special to watch. So I love the juxtaposition of the sheer size and power of these animals versus the delicate behavior that we were seeing there. Really beautiful to watch. And it seems there has been no sign of the lions that were seen at Safari Hook earlier today. So plenty of other animals coming and going. But no sign of the lions, but I'm sure they're not going to go too far. I don't know this area where the next closest water would be. I can't imagine that lions would have gone too far. Plenty of opportunity for hunting, probably waiting for the shadows of darkness now. And there'll be lots of animals attracted to the water in this very dry habitat, as you can see. But we're almost out of time, unfortunately. Only a couple of minutes left. Vivi, I'm glad that you've enjoyed today's show. Time has flown, actually. This one's gone very quickly, but we've seen some beautiful sights today. Great to see the hyena. But we've had some beautiful elephant interactions and elephant sightings, elephants playing in the mud at Tau. So some wonderful communication here down at Safari Hook. And that little tiny baby, even if it was only brief up at Hyena Pan, they will always a highlight of any show that we do. But thanks for everybody for your questions and comments. We've had lots come through today. You've kept me very much on my toes. But it's been an absolute joy and delight to share these images with you and to share hopefully some insights and to answer your questions. I'll be back again tomorrow at normal time, so 12:30 Central African time. I hope you'll all be able to join us again, and we will continue our endless vigil of these amazing cameras across Africa. Oh, the size of the horns on this transfer. It seems the elephants are moving on, the other animals are moving in, but it's about time for us to also move on. So, whatever your plans are for the rest of the day, please do enjoy them. We hope you've enjoyed today's show, and we will see you again, same time tomorrow for more fun and games at the waterhole.